Very fancy. I'm feeling very powerful today, so we might all be given a car or arrested, or I don't know. Who knows what I might do up here. I'm Diane Fleet. I am the chair of the LFUCG Homeless Prevention and Intervention Board. I'm also with Greenhouse 17. We're going to go ahead and get this meeting started. Thank you so much for being here today. And I think we're going to go through roll call first.
Thank you, Diane. Joy Andrade.
Present.
Amanda Bryant. Chris Clark. Bruce Davis.
Here, right.
Diane Fleet is here. TC Johnson. Kathy Plowman.
Here.
Bo Revlett.
Here.
Liz Sheehan is excused, as is Janice James. Alicia Still Branham.
Here.
And Lella Still.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Minutes.
All right.
I'm hoping all of you have had a chance to review the minutes, but if you want to take a second, they were sent to you by email. So if you just want to take a second, and then we'll approve the minutes or have conversation. Is there any comments? Corrections? May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We need to take a vote on that, so all those in favor of accepting the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? We have approval. On to the public and partner. So the next item on the agenda is public and partner comments for issues on the agenda. Have you had a chance to review?
And since this is not our normal meeting location, I'll just say if you do have a comment or question for items on the agenda, you can just come to the podium.
Jeff, I think we're good.
I think so.
All right. So now we're moving on to Data and Systems Integration Committee report, and Joy Andrade is the chair.
Thank you so much. I'll be happy to provide that update. So we met on February 7th at the East Side Branch Lexington Public Library. We started the meeting by approving December 6th meeting minutes with no comments or changes. The first item of business of the agenda was to discuss in length the point in time count that occurred on January 31st, 2024. At the time, Jeff noted that they were still compiling and evaluating the data. However, at the time it was noted that our preliminary numbers had seemed to increase, which is consistent with what we are seeing nationally. It was also noted by Marissa that this year was a great success with record number breaking volunteers, as well as being able to increase our sites checked from 60 last year to 95 this year. The overall feedback was positive, and there was discussion from individuals in attendance of the meeting regarding personal experiencing during the Lex count. For the second item, business item, was Jeff and Marissa provided a preliminary review of an assessment tool that we hope to be able to roll out at the earliest, July 1st of this year. This assessment tool is made up of 30 questions. The goal is to be able to move away from the VSBDAT to get a more accurate assessment for those in need. And they also will be reaching out to individual providers to ensure that it is phrased in the best possible way prior to bringing it to a vote. But there was additional discussion and feedback was provided from those in attendance regarding the formatting of the assessment and questions asked. So Marissa and Jeff are working to continue to develop and make changes, and will bring forth a future draft for official voting. So the last official item on the agenda was Marissa providing an in-depth coordinated entry report. Some highlights being that during the calendar year 2023, 1,527 individuals were served. The total number of individuals referred to housing was 92. Of those, 57 received rapid rehousing referrals, and 35 received permanent supportive housing referrals. Of the referrals made, 45 rapid rehousing referrals was successful, and 25 permanent supportive housing referrals were successful. And then if we break down those who served by gender, we see that 53 were male, 23 were female, and 2 were trans individuals. Also, it's important to note about those numbers that these numbers excluded those who completed a coordinated entry enrollment with a VSP. And then lastly, we opened for public sharing, where Bo Revlett at the time provided an update on House Bill 18. We concluded the meeting with a motion, and our next Data and Systems Integration meeting will be held April 3rd at 1:30. It will take place at the East Side Branch, Lexington Public Library.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody who has any questions or comments about Joy's report? Okay. Nope. All right. Next, we're going to go on to the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee report, and because Liz isn't here, then Jeff will go ahead and fill in.
Yes, Councilmember Sheehan is currently in budget hearing meetings, but was kind enough to send along her report for me to share with you. So the last meeting of the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee was held on February 21st at the East Side Public Library. We started with an approval of the meeting minutes from the December 13th, 2023 meeting, which was approved. Then the next item on our agenda for discussion was a report on the Lexington Homelessness Fund for calendar year 2023. We discussed the current status of the funds, potential uses of the fund, and strategies for growing the fund in the future. We also had 4 program reviews. First, we heard from Community Action Council regarding their Domestic Violence Bonus Initiative Rapid Rehousing Program. Discussion on this presentation included clarification on data entry and some of the abbreviations used. Second, we heard from Community Action Council on their Emergency Family Housing Program. Discussion on this presentation included whether units were hotels or master leased apartments, how income data was captured, and if the program proposal would be changed in the upcoming ESR grant application to potentially expand the program. Third, we heard from the Lexington Housing Authority on 2 programs. First was their Shelter Plus Care Permanent Supportive Housing Program. Discussion included information on the exits from the program and unearned income growth. Finally, we heard from the Housing Authority on their Supportive Housing Grant, which is another permanent supportive housing program in partnership with Natalie's Sisters. Discussion included the capacity of the program. Currently, they are full, and communication challenges with clients, for example, individuals that might lack a cell phone, and that they were under the target for moving people into housing within 60 days with an average length of time between enrollment and housing move-in of 45 days. Next meeting for this committee will be on April 17th at 1:30 p.m. at the East Side branch of the Lexington Public Library, 3000 Blake James Drive. Any questions or comments on Program Performance and Evaluation Committee report?
No? Okay, so next up, Bo, Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee report, Bo Revlett, Chair.
Great. So our last meeting was on February 28th. We started with discussing the following meeting. The next meeting of advocacy on April 24th is going to be a COC recruitment or open house style meeting. So if there are organizations who aren't actively involved in the continuum right now who you think might be good to be in the loop, please invite them to that meeting on April 24th. Jeff, is it at the Phoenix building or is it out at the Hope Center's campus?
Advocacy is going to be at the East Side branch of the
East
Public
Side
Library.
branch. Okay, so April 24th, East Side Public Library.
No, actually, it is the Hope Center. It's at the Don Ball Campus Center.
At the Don Ball Campus Center, at the Hope Center. Thank you. And we, in particular, there was a lot of discussion at the meeting about wanting to invite organizations that touch homeless populations but may not be direct homeless service providers. We feel like we have a lot of good representation from direct service providers, but less from, other adjacent groups. And then next on the agenda was an update on source of income discrimination. So the update at the time, and as it stands currently, as I understand, is that Lexington City Council had passed a ban on source of income discrimination. And then the state passed a bill preempting local governments from enacting such legislation. And my understanding is that currently the city's legal team is looking at it and in limbo about what's next. After that, there was an update on lived experience engagement. Marissa wasn't able to attend, so we didn't get a full update. So Marissa, if you have any update to share today, I would love to hear it. I know.
Yeah, thank you. So our next update regarding our lived expertise is going to be centered around our coordinated entry assessment, as Joy indicated in her meeting minutes and her report out. We have done a lot of work. In our last coordinated entry meeting, we finalized our draft of our coordinated entry assessment. So our next step is going to be meeting with folks with lived expertise and getting a feel for the types of questions that we're asking, the order of the questions that we're asking, explanation as to why we're asking these questions. That way, when we send it to our victim service providers as well as the Kentucky Fair Housing Council, it's really a check for language specifically, but we're wanting to make sure that we get that input from folks. We are looking at places. I know that the public library, Lexington Public Library here at the Central Public Library, was informed to us as a really good spot location-wise for meeting with folks. However, I think that the best, we want to get as many folks as possible in their largest venue there, the parish theater. The theater there is not quite the most conducive for group discussion, and so really determining kind of when and where we think that would be best for folks to, we want to be mindful that that's where they stated that would be best, but we also don't want to just limit our options for that as well.
Thank you, Marissa. And then next, we talked about IDs for those experiencing homelessness. Jeff gave a report. This program has been running for right around a year. The board had put $1,200 towards it. We have issued 400 ID letters. 129 of those have been redeemed. And Jeff gave reminders to organizations that are issuing these letters to make sure, or submitting requests rather, to make sure that you include their full legal name, including middle name, and when you take the photo, make sure that they aren't wearing hats or sunglasses so they can verify who the person is. And then in public comments, there was a little bit discussion of the Hope Village, and in particular, there had been an event the previous Thursday that went really well, where a bunch of service providers came together. And so there was a lot of discussion of that and people being proud of how that went. The next meeting is April 24th at the Don Ball Campus Center, 1:30. at the Hope Center, and there is one vote that came out of this. We have program standards for permanent supportive housing that came out. There was a motion from the committee that I don't know if it's a board or full COC vote. Board.
It would be board. The membership vote would be from committee.
Got it. Perfect. So there's a motion out of the committee. I don't think the motion from committee needs a second. Marissa, do you want to give any context on this?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think that I just want to thank all of our PSH providers. I know that we've had numerous discussions of that, of these standards and some of the big changes that I want to highlight for the board as you're looking over that and determining your vote, is that we really wanted to make sure that we were including, right, our COC-wide initiative to engage those with lived expertise and lived experience. We really tried to integrate that more thoroughly within these program standards, from everything from transparency, providing documentation for folks. That way they have full copies of everything that they are signing off on, the expectation, as well as making sure that there is a written standard and policy concerning having folks provide feedback, both that the organization and the program is soliciting feedback, and if feedback is provided without solicitation, that is being incorporated within. So those were some of the big highlights. Some other things that have been updated were links for everything were up to date, made sure that they were applicable. And then also some additional changes were specifically around dates, housing move-in dates, when we expected referrals and those move-in dates to occur, just keeping in mind the reality of our current housing market and making sure that that was accurate.
And I think it still needs a second. I think the motion is the committee approval, but we would still need a second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? All right, it passes. Very good. Vote, thank you. I just want to say thank you to you and your committee for so much of the work that you did with source of income discrimination, and I'm really proud of the work that the city has done, our council people have done. Thank you so much. I hope there's still a good fight in this, whether there's some legal ramifications or remedies around it. And I have to say, just being up on the legislature for different things, I do think the more people heard about it, there was a lot of misunderstanding, and I think if we can come at it again with much more clarity, I hope that there's potential, but thank you so much for all of that. All right, any comments or any questions for Bo or his committee before we move on? Good.
What time's your meeting at the library on
1:30. And it's at Don Block campus.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, yeah. We're getting a tour of the city this way. Yeah. All right, good. So next on our agenda is the encampment standard of procedure and review report, and that will be Jeff.
Thank you. So this report was included in the meeting packet. We had approximately 3 locations. I'll explain that in a moment. So the first location was at Sarin Drive and Man of War. This would have been a location that you would have seen in our last report as well. This time around, we were notified of an encampment through Environmental Services on December 13th. There were numerous attempts at contact. Primarily, there were 2 residents that were staying at that location who already had a housing referral in process. So we were able to follow up with the housing provider and keep communication open during that housing search process. And then around the time of the winter storm in January, I believe that would have been approximately January 12th. Those 2 individuals were transitioned to shelter and then moved directly into permanent housing. We awaited the opportunity to confirm that move-in and to notify the residents so that they could retrieve any belongings that they had left behind and weren't able to take with them to shelter so that those items were not lost. Outreach then did an additional check on January 24th to make sure that there were no additional residents at that camp. Initial notice was January 11th. Final notice was January 29th, with removal occurring on February 5th at a cost of $1,325. Because this was the second cleanup that we performed in this area within a very short span of time, it was designated at that time as an emphasis area. The next cleanup that we had is listed in the report as one location because the cost information that I received was grouped together as one job by the contractor, but it actually involves 4 separate locations: the Main Street Bridge, Manchester Street Bridge, Virginia Avenue Bridge, and DeRoad Street Bridge, all of which are presently designated as emphasis areas. These were not instances of active encampments that were reported to us, but just part of routine cleanup that goes on at emphasis areas. That would have been a cleanup on February 13th and an overall cost of $2,100, and that would have been approximately $525 for each location. On that location, there is an error. I should not have posting dates listed there as emphasis area and no active encampment. There was no posting for those locations. Finally, we had a third location near Alexandria Drive and New Circle Road. OHBI was notified by code enforcement on January 30th. Multiple attempts were made between then and the initial posting that went up on February 13th. During that time, no contact was made. Outreach continued to make efforts during the time of the initial posting and prior to the final posting. Contact was made with 2 individuals on February 15th. One of those individuals communicated plans to relocate to shelter, and the other said that they would relocate voluntarily, but both declined services. An additional check was made just prior to final posting being made on February 26th. Cleanup and removal occurred on February 4th with a cost of $825. That means that there were 6 unique locations involved in this report. The total cost for this period is $4,250 with an average cleanup of approximately $1,062.50. In terms of outreach and engagement efforts, we continue to see around or sometimes just below 50% of individuals accepting services, and the majority of the locations, again, in this report were designated emphasis areas. Any questions regarding the encampment report?
For the emphasis areas, what did the costs go to if there weren't any active encampments? Like what were they having to clean up?
Can you rephrase the question?
For the location 2, for the 4 emphasis areas, you said there weren't any active encampments there, so what was it that they had to clean up?
So usually it's going to be debris that's left behind from things like rough sleeping. So it could be cardboard, beverage and food containers. Essentially, it's not personal belongings. It's trash and debris that's left behind when people might stay there overnight. Typically, there would be signage present, so they, I think, understand that that's an area that camping is not allowed permanently. But we do have sometimes just items that are left behind from people hanging out or sleeping overnight.
I think you are up again, unless anybody else has questions regarding the encampment, and then we will move to the director's report.
I have a question in regards to that recent report. Can you remind me again, emphasis area?
So our standard operating procedure for addressing homeless encampments involves an ability for us to designate an emphasis area if it's a place that we've had repeated encampments or believe that it's likely that we're going to have additional encampments. Essentially, what we're seeing is areas that we've had a high level of cost associated or a lot of public health and safety concerns. And so we would designate up to 10 areas at any given time. We have to do that within a very short time frame, approximately 24 hours of the removal of the camp, so we can ensure that there's no gap where people are allowed to move in and be unaware. And then that involves signage being posted. For example, we have a stencil that can be used on the bridges, and we just rolled out some new signage that's physical signage that would allow us to post in like wooded areas, just to make sure that that signage can be placed in multiple different locations and visible from different vantage points at the location, so that it's clearly communicated and people do understand that there is a risk that they could potentially have their belongings removed at any time without notice. That said, typically we do still have outreach go out and try to make contact if there's any indication that there is an active encampment at that time. So even though our SOP allows us to move very quickly, we still try to act in a compassionate manner if there's any kind of indication that that's active.
Thank you.
And TC, you're welcome to come on up with the board.
It's very cool.
Other questions from the board on the encampment report?
Jeff, I had one quick question about the budgetary implications. So I sort of scrolled ahead to our budget report. Where does the money for the encampment cleanup, like, does that come out of our budget, or is that where does that come from in terms of cost allocation?
That's a good question. So we have different entities that would be responsible for cleanup, depending on what property that would be on. The bulk of the cleanup for encampments on publicly controlled property are going to be from environmental services, and their budget would cover those costs. Presently, the OHPI doesn't maintain any costs within its internal budget. We have just our general fund budget, which is largely staffing and a little bit of operating cost, and then the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund, which obviously should be going towards services and programming. Code enforcement sometimes will contribute some funding towards cleanups. Usually that's on a case-by-case basis, and it might involve, like, if there's a private property owner involved and maybe that private property owner is non-responsive. And then for parks property, they generally have some ability for their staff, unless it's something extensive, to do the cleanup.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, then we'll move along to my report for this meeting. First, just an update on the budget. So pretty soon you'll start to see less sheets within this. We are about to close out funding on our fiscal year 22 funds, which were again rolled onto ARPA funding. We did have a balance from the racial equity audit and analysis that was applied towards operation of the temporary winter shelter. And at this time, we just have a nominal amount. It was $94.81 at the time of sending out the packet, and that is being used to process state IDs. And so we should be able to close that out approximately by the end of the month. Regarding fiscal year 23 funding for the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund, all of those projects, short of the onboarding curriculum for case managers, have closed out. So we have an amount just under $600 that remains unallocated and will likely just be moved with a budget amendment. And regarding the onboarding curriculum, I'll just say that we should hopefully next meeting potentially have an update and presentation from that team. They've been hard at work and have a lot of progress on developing the courses and modules to potentially roll that out around June or July of this year. Moving to fiscal year '24 funding, this is where we did not immediately release a lot of RFPs so that we could understand what our winter costs were going to be. We did have several programs that were funded out of our initial fiscal year '24 commitment, with about $160,000 that was left on that amount. And then we voted recently to go ahead and approve an additional $40,000 for Community Action Council's winter motel shelter program. That was not approved by council at the time I sent this packet out, so it's not reflected here. So that amount's going to be $40,000 less. Then we received an additional commitment from the fund balance conversation. We had already voted to go ahead and use some of that money to support some additions at the New Life Day Center, such as improvements to their outdoor space. And we currently have 2 RFPs that are live on Ion Wave with proposals due March 26. One of those is for an intensive case management program that would work with individuals with complex needs like mental and physical health conditions, connect them with the right levels of service during the time that they're in a homeless situation, and work to move them towards permanent housing, whether that would be facilitating documentation for coordinated entry or potentially exploring other avenues to permanent housing like placement in higher levels of care or in settings like income-based housing. The other RFP that's currently live is going to be for landlord engagement and recruitment activities, knowing that that's something that we have struggled with, and we've seen the length of time between enrollment and move-in continually increase. We wanted to go ahead and put some dedicated funding in that area to allow for a proposal that would help us to gain some additional landlords that we could work with. Following that, we'll be assessing how much money remains to fund additional programs and trying to quickly roll out any additional RFPs for this fiscal year. Next would be the budget on the temporary winter shelter. We had just a small balance that was remaining on the initial commitment on ARPA funds. I just processed an invoice that would close that out, and then we would have the second amount of funding that came also from fund balance that we're now working to expend, and that program will cease operations on April 1st, and we'll do site closeout and understand if there's any balance remaining on that project. Before I move on to other aspects of my report, would there be any questions from the board regarding the budget update? All right, hearing none, and since we were just on the subject of our temporary winter shelter, I wanted to go ahead and give an update on our winter weather response. So first of all, the Hope Village temporary winter shelter, just to give you a sense of the impact to our community, as of today, that shelter has served 920 unique individuals over the course of the season between November 22nd and now. Our average nightly census is going to be approximately 136 individuals. We are seeing that trend downward as we come to the end of the season. The recent 7-day average was approximately 117 individuals. And we are, of course, conscious of the fact that that shelter is going to come to a close. Over the past month or so, a lot of community partners have assisted in efforts to do housing outreach to Hope Village residents. We've held some of those at the Jacobs Cafeteria and some at the Hope Village itself, making sure that we can access people who might not be able to make it down to the cafeteria. Those events are happening every Thursday morning, and it involves things like my office providing access to state IDs. We also had a commitment from the board to use a recent donation received to the Lexington Homelessness Fund to provide some financial assistance to support deposits and initial rent for individuals who are currently staying at the shelter, to ensure that if they have income and an option to move to permanent housing, that they're not displaced at the end of the season. We have all of our street outreach teams, mental health care providers, and several other organizations that have participated, making sure that people are getting connected to ongoing services and any other resources that might improve their situation. I can also share that I will bring to a future board meeting a more robust presentation regarding the outcomes and the demographics and the numbers served, but just some preliminary information that we gave to the YMCA to help them communicate with their board. Some very interesting information. We saw about 30% of the individuals accessing that shelter were female. We saw that about 20% would be individuals that would meet chronic homeless status, which is pretty consistent with our overall system data, but we'll definitely have some more robust information to share soon. The Bluegrass Care Navigators Winter Shelter Program for individuals who are seniors and disabled. That program has served 24 households to date. And that would be 28 persons. And they presently still have 8 households with 11 persons. Of the 17 persons who have already exited, the majority have gone into some kind of a long-term setting like permanent housing or a higher level of care. Unfortunately, we did have 2 individuals that have passed away, and we had 2 persons that stayed temporarily until they were able to return to another shelter. And then we also have Community Action Council's Winter Shelter Program for families with minor children, an expansion of their emergency family housing program. That program this season has served 20 households. They have 10 households that are still with them. Of the 10 that have exited, 8 went to permanent housing and 2 went to temporary housing. I know that we, last time that we met, had approved some additional funding for this program. Although at that time we did not have a lot of information. I think we had maybe 1 invoice to kind of base our cost estimates on for additional funding. Communicating with Marty, they are about to fully expend the additional funds that we had committed to them. And so I want to go ahead, did not know for sure at the time of sending out the agenda that I'd need to make this ask, so it wasn't indicated for a vote, but I am going to ask for one. Marty estimates that we probably need about another $35,000 to go ahead and get through the rest of the season. So my recommendation would be that the board consider making a commitment of probably about $40,000, just so that we would not have to bring that item back for approval to this board. And additionally, I would like to make this my last trip through council on winter resources. But glad to answer any questions, and then if somebody at some point would make a motion.
I guess I just had a quick question, but I don't know, and TC, this might be a little bit, so I'm surprised that even though the Community Action Council housed quite a few people, I would have thought that there might have been more, because there's been so much conversation of families with school-aged children that are housing vulnerable. And is that because that subset of folks often can find friends or family to stay with? It's just not stable housing? Or I just thought that number would be higher. And I don't know that we have the answer to that, but they could take. So
Plus, we've also been working with some of the community partners too, so we've got kind of.
that wasn't your only pot of support or housing. I gotcha. Okay.
So we did initially have a target. We were aiming to operate 3 rooms for the duration of the season. We quickly exceeded that and continued to exceed that, and it wasn't a factor. We just decided after that last time that we had to ask for additional funds, Councilmember Sheehan had made as part of her motion that we would continue to update you all and ask for additional funds as needed. Knowing that, we did not stick to a limit on that. But TC is correct that there were some other community partners that also assisted in that, and I would say probably ballpark around 75% of McKinney-Vento students that you all have are actually going to be at those that are more marginally housed than literally homeless. Is that correct? Okay.
We're currently at 9
I know you've been ringing the bell on that, so that's why I just was wondering, but I see what you're saying. Yeah, thank you for that.
We're putting some things in place, actually, because our focus now is not just obtaining housing, but sustaining it.
Yes.
So we're going into more intensive case management, and so that's where our community partners now are coming on board to actually help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, LFUCG is pursuing a program with McKinney-Vento and with Goodwill. That financial assistance is going to sit with Goodwill, and they're going to receive referrals from TC's office. And the benefit of having that with Goodwill is that even though it's short-term rental assistance, it would be something that they can access the full array of supports from Goodwill, all of their job supports, but also they have lots of programs that provide stipends or access to things like vehicles and bicycles to help maintain employment. It was basically how can we maximize that investment and really make sure that people maintain housing long term. As TC said, having supports like case management, wraparound services to pair with that is really kind of the focus.
And you may have said, well, when does that start? When is that going to be fully operational, do you think?
I'm suspecting maybe April 1st, because we're actually
Great.
meeting this week, because we've got to look at how the referral system is going to work for
Yeah.
us. And then, so we meet tomorrow.
You're excited? Nice.
Very excited.
Yeah.
I was kind of confused there. We have money for this year, we have money for next year.
Yeah. I guess my other just quick question, and I don't know, this might be a question for David, but are we sensing people getting really nervous that their time at Hope Village is getting to come to an end? Or were people kind of prepared? I don't know, those Thursday morning groups, has that been really helpful, I guess, with maybe easing some of the concern?
There's definitely still going to be some concern. Some folks are definitely going to have some concerns about their situation, regardless of whatever interventions that we can develop, just because it's not, when things are in process and it's not already a placement in permanent housing, I think that concern is going to linger for someone. We have had a lot of success having these events and also just having greater stability by having folks in one location throughout the season instead of in and out of hotel constantly, to better work with people. There's been several placements in higher levels of care like assisted living. There's been several folks that have moved into some form of permanent housing and several others that are currently in talks with us to access things like deposit and initial rent assistance. So we're hoping that there's going to be a minimal number of persons that would be looking at not having somewhere to go at the end of the season. Unfortunately, with a program like this, the intent is never to solve or to end homelessness, but to really develop an emergency solution that meets people's needs and keeps them safe. Not that we have not made every effort to make it a longer term impact, but just that inevitably we are not going to permanently house every single person that's in that shelter, but we are going to continue to make every effort. And I do want to just take a moment to appreciate and thank all of the partners who have been a part of that, the housing advocates, Greenhouse, Arbor, Community Action Council, Mountain Comp, Hope Center, Lexington Rescue Mission. Everybody has been tremendously gracious with their time. I know a lot of times agencies don't have capacity to do more than they're doing, but everyone has chipped in, and I think we're making the best effort that we possibly can. Can you turn on your mic?
Okay, with our new partnerships, with us doing the community table talks once a month, we're able to bring in some new community partners that we didn't actually know that was there. And so that's kind of spreading the workload to being able to help. And it's been very fruitful, very fruitful.
And the community table talk is kind of where I got reconnected with Goodwill and kind of started that conversation. So we were thankful for those opportunities. It is helping partners connect.
And because when we first started it, we realized that we were kind of overlapping services because we were not being able to connect to each other. And so now being able to connect to each other, we're able to operate in our expertise and spread out to reach more families for assistance. The Lionheart Trauma Support is one of the new ones that's come on board. And actually, I talked to them yesterday, and they've actually worked, they have 3 of our students now. Yeah. We do have a slight problem, though, is now I have high school unaccompanied minor females that are not connected to any community resource because either they don't have children or there's not some type of drug connection. So right now I have 4 young ladies that we're desperately trying to find housing for them because they're 18, but they're still in the school system.
Are they by any chance connected with Arbor?
Oh, say that again?
Are they by any chance connected to Arbor Youth?
Yes, and I think there might be, we're going to be meeting too, because I think there's some changes going on there, because one of our young ladies we had to place her somewhere else because of the way that they've changed. I think the age also plays the role because they're 18.
So, I know they're a tremendous asset to us in helping navigate housing for folks in that age range. And I know that they're really
18 to
committed.
24, right?
Yeah.
We should brainstorm.
Yes.
Right. And so my last item from my report is going to be, we have previously talked about wanting to have some kind of a board work session for some of our newer board members or just those that might desire a refresher, so we can kind of do some things like make sure that strategically all of our committees have the right members on them, that everyone's clear on which committees that they are participating in. We have some opportunities outside of these meetings to kind of talk through some of our priorities and strategies. So instead of, I know I send you guys a lot of emails, and I thought instead of sending you another doodle poll, that I would use the opportunity face-to-face with you to go ahead and get some input as to how many people might be interested, so I know what kind of a space that I need to book, but also any kind of input around dates and availability. Would want to have at least, 2 weeks or so for me to make sure I can prepare the content and book a space. But I would be very, very glad to have some time with you all. Who would be interested of the board members present and participating in a work session?
I would be interested, yeah.
Okay. So that means, all right, that gives me a rough sense of the space needs. And then, is there any kind of time frame? I'm thinking that, we'll obviously have multiple committee meetings in April. So I don't want to make too many commitments for everybody. If we were looking at the month of March, right now I have a lot of availability on Wednesday, March 27th or Friday, March 29th. And then we can always look further out into April. Usually for me and for our office, end of week is usually the lightest. Fridays would be probably a great idea of a day that we could do. I'm thinking this probably would be something in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 hours at most. I would think 2 hours would probably be a ballpark of what we would need. Is there, in terms of scheduling that, anything that I need to know for those that are interested, dates to avoid or conflicts?
I'm good on 27.
And if anybody wants to throw out any suggestions, I'm open to that too.
I'm out the 29th, but the 27th might work.
It could be anybody new or existing. I mean, everyone's existing, I guess, but new or older members of the board. So a couple people said 27th. Does anybody have a conflict with the 27th?
I could do the 27th also.
I can do it, but in the afternoon.
Yeah, my afternoon is better for me also.
Okay, let me check and see what mine is. Okay, I'm presently open the majority of the day. So would anybody have an issue with March 27th afternoon? Okay, I will book a space and follow up with more firm details on time and location so we can continue the conversation and make adjustments if needed. But I'll go ahead and look at that date as our first option. As a follow-up to that,
Jeffrey, did you hit what time?
We hadn't set a time yet. They were saying the afternoon worked better for most people. Would you have availability? Okay. And I'll probably throw out something in the neighborhood of 1 if I can find the space that's available, but if I need to make it later, just let me know. Kind of connected to this, we had in January done an update of our governance charter, which specified that for openings on our board, that the Continuum of Care Board or designee would have a process in determining who would fill those seats. Previously, I made recommendations to the mayor for appointment to the HPI board, but to be in full compliance with HUD COC regulations, we really need the board representation to be representation from the membership. So we needed for this board and for the membership to have an active role. And we were looking at making a selections committee to review the applications received and make recommendations. We do have 1 current vacancy, and so I would want to move to try to fill that timely. My thought would be previously, Lela, Bo, and Liz had all expressed an interest in serving on a committee like that. My recommendation would be if we wanted to make a motion today to formally establish a work group with those as our 3 initial members, and I would go ahead and work with them timely within a short span to go ahead and get together and make a recommendation regarding our immediate vacancy, and then we could follow up at the board work session with a process for how we want to identify the other members of that committee, like the Continuum of Care members, and we'd also wanted to include at least 1 member of that committee that would be a person with lived experience. But just knowing that, like, for example, identifying someone with lived experience that has a desire and the ability to serve, making sure that it's a fair representation of Continuum of Care members. I just would feel best about having board input on what that process looks like. Glad to answer questions about that proposal or see how you guys feel about it. Any thoughts? I would need a motion, yes. Right.
Second.
We've got a motion and we've got a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, that motion passes. Thank you. I think we are trending in a good direction. I really appreciate everyone's participation. At this time, I want to go ahead. I had a late addition to the agenda that I wasn't able to send out to you, but we are fortunate enough to have Ed Holmes with us, who is working on our affordable housing needs assessment. He's already rolled out a survey that a lot of community members and advocates have participated in, and we are in the midst of doing a round of town hall, public hall kind of meetings. 2 of those have already taken place. There are going to be some additional dates at different libraries throughout March, and then a session at the Senior Center at the beginning of April. But also just wanted to give Ed an opportunity to speak with the group today. Ed, if you want, you're welcome to come to the podium and share a little bit about this project.
Thanks, Jeff, and hello, committee. Like Jeff had indicated, I'm Ed Holmes, and we're with EHI Consultants. We're a planning and urban firm here in Lexington that provides a variety of urban design, urban planning. And we've been fortunate enough to be doing the affordable housing and needs assessment with Housing and Community Development and the Homeless Board. So we've had a pretty robust agenda of meetings the last 2 months, 2.5 months. Our surveys rolled out, and we've received probably about 1,300 to 1,400 responses on the survey, which is pretty significant. And we've held 2 public meetings, outreach meetings. We've got 3 more meetings planned at the North Side Library, the East Side Library, and the senior center in early April. The meetings have gone well. Some have been pretty well attended, and others have been mixed emotion. But we also had we're having virtual meetings with a lot of stakeholders. So we're in the data gathering phase at this point. We're hoping to conclude the final meeting in April, and then we're going through our analysis. And we've got some pretty interesting census and survey data that we're beginning to look at and go into great detail. And the issues that we're dealing with are the affordability, and that ranges from 80% of the median income in Lexington, which is about 60%, all the way down to the 0% of the homeless population. And how do you aggregate and how do you come up with the housing needs? It's a variety of needs from 80 to 50, 50 to 30, and 30 and below. It really gets difficult for people in this community to afford housing. And while we're seeing the numbers grow, we're also seeing a rise in the average rents since the pandemic and the average sales of housing that's occurring in the community. So there's a gap and there's a disconnect between costs going up and the affordability or the needs that we're seeing in the community. So we're going through the data, we're crunching the numbers, and we'll have a report hopefully around June sometime that we'll present to the board and the city council. I'll be happy to answer any questions if anyone has at this point in time.
Well, we're,
Oh, yeah,
okay,
you are.
there. Okay. All right, Ed, would you be interested in maybe setting up something where I could actually have some of our families through Fayette County Public Schools maybe meet and have some input on the affordable housing?
We'll be happy to, yeah. And we have a website also available, and we have surveys that we've got hard copies, and you can access the survey on the website. But if I could get with you and set up some point in time, we'd be happy to have some of your family. And it's really critical as we look at the affordability, and especially on the family side and school ages. So that would be important for us. So if we could work something.
I can do an email introduction after the meeting so you guys have each other's contact.
Yeah, so I think that would be valuable information for us.
You said the turnout had been mixed at the town halls. What specifically, like roundabout numbers, have the town halls been?
I think we did the first one at the main public library last week. I think there was maybe 6 individuals, and the staff was there. And I think I didn't attend the one yesterday at Beaumont. There was 8 to 10 individuals, I think, that attended that one. But you know, what the takeaway from those, we had some very lively discussions. And so even though they may be few in numbers, the value that we get out of those discussions enables people to feel a little bit more comfortable when this is a smaller group. So I like the group sizes, enabling them to voice their opinions a little bit more openly. In larger groups, maybe 2 or 3 will dominate. So the sizes they're manageable, and yet we're getting some good data from those.
And I'll just add to that Ed, has, like you said earlier, has also done a lot of other meetings other than those town hall formats. There was a one-on-one with my office very early. His team has been great about reaching out to us for information and our input, wanting to make sure that whatever they recommend, that it's going to reflect the needs of this population as well, and some stakeholder meetings with some of our partners and other affordable housing partners. So that's not the full representation, but I understand that there's been some pretty lively discussion even with the small numbers at some of the meetings.
Yeah, and this is making me think about the lived experience engagement, and I wonder, because I know we have some money in the budget for that, and I know y'all already have plans for like the next one, but I wonder if there could be some kind of collaboration.
Last week, Ed came to the Street Voice Council meeting, and we administered the survey there.
Yeah, and I think to date, with the homeless population, we got about 50 from the Street Voice meeting, and they're continuing to gather information or surveys, and I think according to Catholic Action, they might be up to 80 or 90. So we've got a pretty good representation of survey, and that data, we're drilling into it now, gives a much broader picture of the need, the homelessness, and their families that have been addressing that as well. So it's an eye-opener in terms of data and how do we process it, and now we're working through the analysis portion of it. And like Jeff said, we're doing some one-on-one stakeholder interviews also. We've had several of those, home builders, realtors, the council. We had a meeting with several of the council members. So we're reaching out to the public meetings we have, and also we're doing some more focused stakeholder individual meetings.
Anything else for Ed?
Not a question. Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say not a question, but I just wanted to express some appreciation for the work that you all have done to really collaborate. It sounds like you all have really, gone out of your way to get so much input, and I'm really interested to see what the data says. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
I've tried not to co-opt the study since it's not my study, but he's been and his team have been so good about making sure that they communicate with us and reach out to those that we serve and those that we work with.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for us when we get to work in Lexington. We work pretty much in around central Kentucky and other parts of the state. But we know Lexington, we know the community, and we know the individuals. So it gives us even a better opportunity to reach out and have a greater input or get their involvement into the process. So this is a really good process for us, and it's what we do.
Sure. You might want to make sure that you're on a microphone so it can be picked up by the audio.
Okay.
You can come to the podium. You can come up to one of the microphones up here, wherever.
Here you go. You can use this one.
Mainly my question for you is in your research study or surveys, are you also looking at those with disabilities that are facing homelessness, and what kind of response have you gotten from that?
Yeah, that's part of our survey was disabilities as well. So we're gathering that data. It's included.
An organization that specifically focuses on folks with disabilities.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I think in the survey there's a question on disabilities.
Thank you, Ed. If you have nothing else, then we'll open it up to other announcements or public sharing for items not on the agenda. Jenny, I think you had something.
Jeff, before we get to that, did you need a motion for $40,000?
Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. Thank you for bringing us back there.
Just thought it might.
That might be helpful. Yeah, let's do that.
I'll move for that.
Okay.
$40,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. I would have been very disappointed if I had gotten through this meeting without it. It's one of the pitfalls of speaking a lot. Lots to keep up with. Now, other issues or public sharing for items not on the agenda.
Okay, I do want to say our next community table talk will be next Friday, March the 22nd, and it's going to be held at the Goodwill Center from 9 to 11:30. So if you're able to come out, please come out. And then I want to just say thank you to all the community partners that do come to Table Talk. We are making a difference. Well, the work that we're doing at Table Talk is definitely making a difference. So thank you all.
I'm way shorter than the last guy that was up here. My name is Jenny Zamora. I'm the Executive Director of New Life Day Center, and I just wanted to give some updates to our panhandling diversion, our van work program. Basically, if you don't know what it is, we have run a program in partnership with the city's Environmental Services Department for the last several years, where persons flying a panhandling sign are offered work. They can help picking up trash through the city. There are certain routes that they go on, and they get paid hourly and have a lunch allowance as well. And New Life Day Center has done this 3 half days a week, weather permitting, for I think it's been since 2014. Because the city's needs for help with the cleanup have increased and panhandling has increased in the city again, and our capacity at the day center to help has increased. We've had some meetings with the city's Department of Environmental Services, and starting April 1st, we are going to have, instead of 3 half-days a week, we are going to be operating 5 days a week, weather permitting, and instead of 5 hours a day, it's going to be bumped up to 7 hours a day. So that's more people who are panhandling and looking for work that we will be able to direct in a positive way through our program that we run. We will meet again in October to talk about the effectiveness of this program and see what changes need to be made and if we're going to continue going forward. The second change that came from our meeting, which we're excited about, is that typically we receive the routes from environmental services each day that we go out. Our van driver receives routes. They have allowed us now to add the day center and the few blocks surrounding the day center in as one of the regular routes, 1 day a week or as needed. We may have some wiggle room there, so that we are being good neighbors in the area where the day center is located. So right now, starting out, and we started that this past Monday. Right now, the radius that we are going to include, the borders would be 4th Street on, I guess, the north, Short Street on the south, Broadway on the west, and Elm Tree on the east. So we're really thankful about that. We're open to feedback around those borders, but right now we're hoping that this is going to help the MLK Association be happier with us as neighbors, as well as some of the private schools that are kind of located within this radius too. So we just wanted to make everyone aware of that. Thanks.
Appreciate that update. So formal today.
Hi, I'm Shannon Derrick with Passport by Melina. I'm going to leave some flyers on the back here. We're offering a free expungement clinic to anybody in the Lexington area on March 25th, and we would love to see the room packed. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want, I can also send that out through our listserv.
Love that. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I just want to say that I'm excited to be back. My name is Stephanie Spires, and I am the new Executive Director at Arbor Youth Services, but as most of you all know, I'm the old Executive Director at Arbor Youth Services from a decade ago. For those of you who don't know, we've been around since 1976. We do have a shelter for under 18. The majority of our service, though, is for that 18 to 24-year-old population. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm enjoying reconnecting with all the old faces and everybody that I've worked with through the years. But I wanted you to have a name, face, and know I'm back and know that I'm excited to work with you all.
Thank you. I appreciate you making a reintroduction so we can get people connected with you again. Other announcements or public sharing? All right, if not, then our next regular meeting is going to be on May 8th. That'll be a little bit early in the month for us, and that will be back at the 3rd floor Phoenix Building Conference Room at 1:30, again, May 8th. So that would be everything. Do we have a motion from someone to adjourn?
Second.
All right, that was quick and easy. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. You have a good day.
Thank you, Jeff.